The history of peoples is made by the unwritten history of great travels and world travelers, a history that began long before Herodotus or Marco Polo in the Neolithic or even earlier. In some fantastical age of mankind, perhaps even at the dusk of the primordial golden age, the glacian or flood, and with the first in a series of catastrophes faced by the human species, then followed eras of the migrations of peoples and races. If we believe Plato, then the Atlanteans were the first colonists in the world and they came from the west. Others say that their ancestors were the Hyperboreans who fled snow and ice in the far north of the continent. Over the course of the subsequent history, peoples would move from north to south and from east to west and not otherwise. This constitutes their course through history, a path of aging, degeneration and at times faster, at times slower, of inexorable decline. This is how great conquests began, those that encompass immense regions, entire continents, and this is how great wars start, like the one that raged under the walls of the Elohim. Or was this only a shadow of some mythical war waged in the far deeper past? During the mythical age of the earth, perhaps at the beginning of time, in illo tempore, they did not rush towards unknown and exotic lands, but towards their lost homelands, towards mythical lands of the beginning, towards the riches of the golden age, towards primordial, Edenic abundance, towards paradise lost, such as the biblical one, which we have not stopped searching for here on earth even today. One Islamic mystic, Sohrawardi, claimed that after death the soul returns to the homeland, for merciful Allah Himself commanded this, and this would not be possible if we had not previously resided in it. This mythical homeland is to be found somewhere in the spiritual east. In order to find the strength of this, we must start from the spiritual west, the western wells of exile. The true journey, true adventures of the spirit. This Sheikh taught, start in the west. This is a place like a grave, a stockade of the burial place. Arriving on the soil of an unknown continent, Christopher Columbus thought he had discovered the new earth mentioned in the Apocalypse of St. John. The famous seafarer believed he was in the Gulf of Paria and in its fresh currents had discovered the origin of the 4 rivers of the lost heavenly garden, Eden itself. God made me the messenger of the new heaven and the new earth, of which he spoke in the Apocalypse of St. John, and before that through the mouth of Isaiah, Columbus proclaimed to the King Juan, and he showed me the place where to find it. There is no single land, island or continent in the world that is a mere geographical certainty. The whole earth is a sacred text, a holy book written in special signs, or at least this is what mystics or esotericists believe. The words of this text, it is thought, were written by God Himself. Every journey is in fact a pilgrimage, for we are always walking on sacred ground. Every land and landscape, far and near, possesses hidden meaning and secret significance. Spiritual, symbolic, eschatological, and even profoundly mystical. A landscape is at once both a physical and spiritual reality. This is the domain of a secret, mysterious science, mystical and sacred geography, whose knowledge, as happens, has been lost forever over the course of centuries or millennia. The king of the world. Legend claims that somewhere in the depths of the earth, in dark caves and secret passages, there still lives one such sacred land inhabited by a secret, mysterious people, one hidden from the sight of others, that this is known to only a few chosen ones on the surface, and that this knowledge is a strictly guarded secret, or maybe it was until recently. This secret kingdom is called Agartha. This legend is ancient and comes from remote prehistory. Agartha is spoken of in the legends of diverse peoples, white, red and yellow, in both east and west. Agartha is a kingdom hidden underground, populated by a people gifted by miraculous power, a people that lives in wisdom and immense health. But Agartha is even more than that. It is the spiritual center of mankind, ruled by a hidden ruler, the head of its initiatic hierarchy. His title is King of the World. Legend holds that this supreme spiritual and metaphysical center of mankind, Agartha, has not always been hidden underground, nor will it stay there forever. This condition corresponds to the fallen state of humanity, the age of darkness and confusion which, it is said, has lasted for the past 6,000 years. In 1890, the king of the world allegedly issued the following prophecy in the monastery of Narabanki. The time will come when the peoples of Agharti will come up from their subterranean caverns to the surface of the earth. Travelers who have set their minds to find it have whispered about it. Caravan merchants have told exhilarating tales of it in inns and on mountain trails, in deserts, and in remote corners. It is known to Tibetan sages, whose teachings nourish monks and lamas. The common crowds meanwhile ridicule and laugh at such tales as the superstitions of the uneducated and gullible. The tale of Agartha reached the West from two independent sources. In a book published posthumously in 1910, The Mission of India, and French esotericist Saint Yves d'Alvader introduced the West to Agartha as a Buddhist myth of a secret center of the world, hidden somewhere in the depths of the Himalayas, India or Afghanistan. D'Alvader's account was commented upon by another French esotericist, the founding thinker of traditionalism, René Guénon. Traditionalist thought, through the works of René Guénon, provided an exegesis of this myth. At its deepest root is the idea of the supreme spiritual center, the spiritual center of humanity during the last time cycle of humanity, that is, the Iron Age, in the traditions of the peoples of the West. As Guénon observed, numerous parallels and analogies of the Buddhist myth of the king of the world can be found across the most diverse traditions, from the Hindu and Jewish through the Islamic and Christian to the Celtic myth of the Holy Grail, which was subsequently superficially Christianized. The very name Agartha or Agartha, Guénon writes, means imperceptible and inaccessible and also inviolable, since it is Salem, the abode of peace. But the name of the spiritual center before the present time cycle was Paradesha, whence the Chaldean parades or the paradises known to the Western traditions. Moreover, Guénon drew a connection between Agartha and the light of the East of Islamic esotericism. Absolute pole. The light of the East is none other than the light of the North, the gold of the North mentioned by the classical writers. In other words, Agartha is only one of many projections of the pole, the North Pole, Hyperborea or Paradise, which has shifted over the course of history from the north to the west and from the south to the east. There exists, to name it, the absolute pole. Agartha is an eastern projection of the absolute pole. We cannot seek this mystical pole above the surface of the earth, at the top of Mount Meru, as it was in the Golden Age or in the Hyperborean cycle, but only underground, not in the polar ice of the Arctic, but in the east of the Eurasian continent. Emanuel Swedenborg issued the mysterious pronouncement that in our age the lost world is to be found only among the wise men of Tartary and Tibet, that is, in the east. Some authors claim that contact have been maintained with this center during almost all of the historical cycle of the West. This contact was at all times direct and realistic, but the final projection of the North Pole, the sanctuary of the sacred king of the world in the east, has become more and more inaccessible and mystified. It was interrupted only in late historical times. Guénon states that this happened soon after the 30 Years' War, more precisely in 1648, when the real Rosicrucians, 12 in total, left Europe and withdrew to Asia to Agartha. The second Western source on Agartha was the Polish traveler and author Ferdynand Ossendowski, who in his book Beast, Men and Gods, published in 1924, reported on his tumultuous trip throughout Central Asia during the years 1921 to 22. There is a moment, Ossendowski claims, when stillness overcomes the world, when wild animals stop in their run, horses stop to listen, birds stop flying, and travelers stop in their tracks. Holds of sheep and cattle and yokes crouch down to the ground, and dogs cease their barking. The wind subsides into a slow trembling of air, and the sun stops in its motion. For a moment, the whole world sinks into silence. An unfamiliar song penetrates the hearts of animals and people. This is the moment when the king of the world in Agartha speaks with God himself, when tongues of flame in the letters of the Latin alphabet erupt from his altar. Ossendowski's account also received the commentary of Guénon, Gwenon explains that Ossendowski wrote the name of this underground kingdom as Agharti, whereas Saint Yves d'Alvidre used the form Agartha, the latter being known to have been in contact with at least 2 Hindus. The fact that this mysterious legend from the east reached the peoples of the west in 2 different versions is explained by the fact that d'Alvidre's was inspired by Hindu sources, while Ossendowski was informed by Lamaist ones. The accounts of d'Alvidre, Ossendowski and Gwenon do not, however, exhaust the traces and hints of Agartha. A book published in the 17th century in Leiden mentions a city by the name of Agartha's Oppidum, reportedly located in the Nile Delta of Egypt. This fact was unknown to Gwenon. Lucius Ampelius, a Latin author from the 3rd century, claimed that in this city stood a statue with hands of ivory and a bright emerald on its brow. This statue, it is written, incites panic and fear among animals and people, and especially among barbarians. The word oppidum in Latin means elevation, fort or hill. The meaning of the word Agartus is unknown and has no meaning in Latin. It is also recorded that long ago in Media, near the southern coast of the Caspian Sea, stood a city called Agartta. Ptolemy added that the inhabitants of this land called themselves Sargatians, and Herodotus claims that 8,000 Sargatians were present in the army of the Persian king Darius. Asgard, the mythical city of the Aesir, was the capital of the Sarmatians and Roxolana. Some researchers equate Asgard with Agartha. Others think that Agartha was exactly the city mentioned by the Roman Lucius as lying on the banks of the Nile. This is a mistake, the very same mistake committed by in regards to Atlantis or Thule. Agartha is in fact Thule, or rather one in a chain of Thules which appear at different times in different meridians. The same is true of its mysterious inhabitants who at times come out onto the surface of the earth. Thus the name Agartha has been known since ancient times, since the very beginning of history, and it can be found everywhere, from ancient Egypt to Bactria. In its projections, in its representation on earth, in its secondary variations, just as very Thule, including even Atlantis, is only a projection of the primordial and original Hyperborean Thule, the one erected by the hands of man-gods at the dawn of time. Agartha and America, the fact that all the known names of sacred geographical centers corresponding to cosmic cycles and events, Hyperborea, Thule, Atlantis, etc., come up in the investigations of Agartha, and that this is happening in the modern age, especially since the discovery of America is no coincidence. If the discovery of America, or rather the return of America to history, triggers such unrest among peoples, then what will happen if the prophecy of the end of the world is fulfilled and the secret Agartha becomes known to all of humanity? It is prophesied that the people of Agartha will once more come out onto surface of the earth, and likewise paradise, the Garden of Eden, is hidden somewhere in the east. It is in the east of the wise sages of Tartary. Swedenborg claimed that we should search for the long-forgotten word. What is the link between Agartha and America? It is the same thread that interconnects all continents. Could their appearance, or rather reappearance, on the horizon of the world history represent a sign of the final times, the end times? The secret of America was known to the Vikings, the Egyptians, and the Phoenicians even thousands of years before the Portuguese and Spanish seafarers. Esotericists and the adepts of secret societies, mystics and conjurers, astrologers and neophytes, the followers of secret cults and obscure conspirators, all are still weaving their dark webs around Agartha and the deep mysteries that hide this underground kingdom. America is not only the land of apocalypse, a story that speaks about the end of the world and the last revelation. The first newcomers identified America with paradise, where even the trees and plants spoke the hieroglyphic language of our Adamic or primitive state. The new world was for them a projection of paradise on earth, by which God baptized his chosen people, the new Israel. Others identified America on no lesser grounds with Atlantis, whose downfall was described by Plato, failing to observe that the Greek philosopher was precise in the details he gave, and that besides the island of Atlantis, he also mentioned a land in the west surrounded by ocean on all sides. This, there can be no doubt, is the North American continent. America is only its shadow, its projection in the far west, the false Atlantis. America is, of course, not the mythical island of Atlantis that vanished and the Atlantic Ocean at the very dawn of history. It is actually the Greenland, the land of the dead, the kingdom of shadows. In the West that is mentioned in the legends and myths of many peoples, America is transatlantis. What is the meaning of the reappearance of dead, sunken continent on the horizon of world history? In the same way, Agartha is also a land of the dead, which, as prophecy holds, is still to be discovered in the depths of the underground. In historical times, this reportedly was realized by some travelers and seekers. One of them was a Mongolian hunter who could not keep his secret, and thus had his tongue cut out by llamas. The Lama Jamstrap spoke of this in his book. Another was an illiterate Norwegian sailor who claimed to have lived in Agartha for several years. The reader will see that these fleeting mentions are not without grounds, and that America and Atlantis are closely connected without the topic of Agartha, the mysterious kingdom hidden in the everlasting dark, deep underground and deep in the past. It is closely connected with the worlds of the dead and the past, with the past that refuses to die, and it verily conceals many secret histories of the human race. And yet the idea, an underground hiding place of the incarnation of the sacred, celestial principle is in itself contradictory. According to sacred logic, the seats of spiritual authority are to be found in mountains, not in the underworld, which is logically and naturally connected with the Teutonic, the infernal, and the hellish. Moreover, archetypes and ideas themselves choose their bearers throughout history, and it is not always possible to accurately distinguish between real and symbolic continents, lands and cities mentioned in sacred text, from the Vedas to Bible. In sacred text, the sacred and earthly planes, physical and sacred geography, physics and metaphysics, constantly intersect. But overall, these fabulous lands are not the product of mere fantasy, rather the matter is one of the fragile memory for which it is still necessary to find the appropriate keys. In this sense, and according to this logic, the light of the north or light of the east, indeed the light of Agartha, is not strictly localizable on the terrestrial plane. Likewise, journeys to and accounts of Agartha are not mainly travels in geography and history, but travels of the spirit, travels whose interior center is that within man. As the Chandogya Upanishad says, now the light which shines higher than this heaven on the backs of all, on the backs of everything, in the highest worlds, than which there are no higher verily, that is the same as this light which is here within a person. The chains of Agarthas lead along and are the chains of spiritual journey. In journeying to Agartha, we are traveling into the light of myth. The reawakening of myth is a reawakening of that hidden mysterious inner light within ourselves. In this dimension, lost and found lands, islands, continents and kingdoms like Agartha have something to tell us that is quite different from the positive geographical discoveries and research of recent history. About the author, Boris Nad is a Serbian thinker and writer of diverse genres, the author of more than a dozen books of matter, spiritual and geopolitical. His works on the worlds of myth and mythological range from philosophical essays to novels, short stories, and various poetry and prose. Nad's geopolitical analyses are regularly published by Serbian and international media.
If you enjoy this video and want to see more like it, please consider subscribing to us and hitting the like button. Feel free to write a comment below and suggest which theory you want to see next. If you'd like to further support this channel, please consider joining. Our membership link will be found in the description box below. We appreciate your support, and as always, thanks for watching.